Hello, this is Cheesy, and it's time for another screencast. In our last episode, we saw how we could build wrappers around jQuery UI controls in order to register them with the page object gem so that we could use them as if they were a single element. In this episode, we're going to actually build a Ruby gem from scratch to do just that, to provide UI widgets that wrap around the jQuery UI controls to make it much easier for us to test applications that use those controls. Now we're going to do one thing a little different this time. I'm not going to do all of the coding live, and the reason for that is there's a lot to do, and when I just practiced this just a second ago, it took me nearly an hour to do the whole thing, and I think that I could shorten it up by entering in some of the typing off recording to make it short enough so that, but still get the same point across. So let's get started right away. The first thing I need to do is I need to generate the initial structure for this gem, and I'm going to use Bundler to do that. And I need to decide what am I going to call the gem, and I'm going to call it jQuery UI widgets. Okay, and that created the initial version or the initial layout. Let's go ahead and open that up in RubyMine. And while that's opening up, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that directory. And I'm going to go ahead and run bundle. Now, okay, let's take a look at what we have here. As you can see, it has created a few files for us already. We're going to be looking at quite a few of them right now and getting it set up. In fact, the first file we're going to look at is the gem spec file. This is the file that actually defines the gem itself. And there's a lot of information in here. We need to make sure it's all right. The first thing that I see right away is that it has named my module incorrectly, or not the way I want to name it. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. And just to make sure that I don't forget to do it later, I'm going to go ahead and actually physically change the module itself as well. So there's that, and I need to do the same thing right here. And I am in a file called version.rb, and there's one other change I need to make in this file. This file here is the single file that determines the version of the gem as it gets released. Okay, I think I got all that straightened out. I need to provide a description for this gem, and so I will do that now. And I like that description, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it and put it for the summary. The home page. And there are two additional things that I need to do in this file before it is done. The first is I need to define what are the dependencies of this gem. In other words, if you do a gem install jQuery UI widgets, what should it also pull in? And of course, it needs the page object gem. Now, it was version 0.8.0 that first added the ability to do what we're about to do, so I need to make sure that I tell it that you need greater or equal to that version. And the last and final thing I need to do is I need to tell it which gems you would need to pull in if you decide that you want to develop on this project. The first one is Cucumber, and the last one is RSpec. Okay, this file is done. The next thing that I need to do is I'm going to update the gem file. What I usually put in here is the things that I want to have on my local machine for development the way that I like to do it. So I use rake all the time, so we'll add that there. And I like to use a gem called guard to put my tests in an auto loop. And so I'm going to add the 2 entries that I need for that. Okay, and that is all I need to do there. I'm going to go ahead and hop over to here and do a quick bundle. Great. Okay, the next file that I want to edit is, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and set up our guard. And let's set it up to run Cucumber. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually create a new file called guard file. And this is the definition of when it should run. So I like most of what it has here, except I think that there's one change I want to make. Whenever it sees any file in the step definitions change, I don't want it to just randomly run something. I want it to run everything in features. So we'll add that there. The other thing I want to add is if it finds anything in the lib directory that ends with a .rb, I also want it to run all of the features. And last but not least, let's see, if the YAML file changes, cucumber.yaml file changes, oops, I just happen to notice here that I've got a couple of bad entries. Okay, much better. If the cucumber.yaml file changes, I also want it to run all of the features. Now, let me take a quick look at this just to make sure that I have got everything right. Okay, I do. A few other parameters that I want to pass to guard when it runs. The first thing I want to do is I want to tell it not to use notification. What it would typically do is it would display a little pop-up with some information about it. I'm going to have a terminal running, so I don't really need that. The other thing I'm going to tell it is, by default, when it runs from a failing to a pass state, it makes a second pass and runs all of the features. And I don't want it to do that. And then the last thing, I want to pass a little command line option. And I want to tell it to use a Cucumber profile called Focus. Okay, that's all I need to do for that file. And so I believe I'm ready to move on to the next thing, which is to create my profiles. So let's create a Cucumber YAML file. And I'm going to build a few profiles out here. But the one thing I want to show you, I'm going to create several profiles. And there are some options that I want to be able to use across all of them. So I'm going to define that and assign that to a local variable. Okay, and there you have that. I've got this local variable, so now let's define a couple of profiles. So for this profile, all I'm doing is saying bring in all those standard ops, and I'm also setting an environment variable called driver to water. Now the reason that I'm doing this is that I need to be able to run all of my tests with both water and with Selenium. And the reason for that is that that's how I make sure that they run well. I'm going to create a profile called Water WebDriver. It's going to be exactly the same as the default. I'm going to create one called Selenium WebDriver. The only difference is it's going to set the driver to Selenium. I'm going to create a focus profile that it will be used by my guard. And it just basically says make sure that it runs everything with the tag of focus. I'm going to create a second focus profile. And I'm going to comment it out. And this might give you some insight into the workflow that I use. What I do all of the time is I run everything except I narrow down what I run. If I were to run the entire feature suite in Page Object, for example, it would take several minutes to run. So when I'm actually developing, I use a tag called focus that I move around to narrow in on the very specific things that I want to run at any given time. Once I get those all working with water, I simply come here, comment out the water focus line, and then comment out the selenium focus line, and it will automatically pick that up because I'm looking at Cucumber YAML in my guard file, so it will automatically pick that up and rerun everything again with selenium. And this is how I ensure that everything works well on both platforms. So I want to do one last thing, which is I want to make sure that I do not include a directory that's created by IntelliJ. And I believe that will get rid of that because I am now ready to do my first commit. It looks like guard file is not added. I want to add that in. And so I am now ready to check this whole thing in for the first time. And there is that. Now we are ready to build out the feature structure, or the structure that we need to run our features. And we're going to start by building a new directory called features, and inside of that we're going to build another directory called support. And also inside of the features we're going to build another directory called step definitions. And we're going to go to the support directory and we're going to create a file called env.rb real quickly. And inside of that, we're going to do just a few simple things. We're going to, first of all, make sure that we've added the lib directory to our load path. We're going to require RSpec expectations. We're going to require jQuery UI widgets. And we're going to require page object. The reason we're requiring page object is because I want to use the page factory. And that's all I need to add in this file. So I think we're done here. I do want to create another file in my support directory called hooks.rb. And I want you to think about this for a moment. I don't want my browser to open and close every single time that a new test runs. If I were to do that, it would take much longer for my test suite to run. So what I want to do in this case is start the browser at the very beginning of the very beginning of the test suite, and then only close it once everything is done. Now here is a warning. This is not good to do all the time. In fact, often when I'm running a test suite against an application to test an application, I don't do this because there might be state or session information stored in the browser that I want to clear out each time. So just a word of warning. Now here is the first case where I am not going to actually type all of this code. I'm going to make some code magically appear for you, and then we're going to talk about it. Voila! And here is the code that I'm going to show you. So what I've done here is I've created a module named persistent browser, and that module has a class level instance variable and two methods. In the first method, I'm checking to see if that browser instance variable has not been initialized yet. What I'm doing is I'm initializing that to a water browser if that driver environment variable is equal to water, or I'm initializing it to a Selenium WebDriver browser object if that driver is equal to Selenium, and I'm returning that. I also have added a second method, quit, which simply just quits the browser. So you can see in my before block, I'm actually calling the persistent browser get browser, and instead of at exit, or instead of in an after block, which would close it after every single test, I've created an at exit where I'm quitting the browser. So this will actually run whenever Cucumber is about to quit. So that's how I have set that up. With that finished, I believe we are ready to start writing our first feature. But the last thing that I want to do here is I want to go ahead and commit what I've done at this point. And we are now ready to write a feature. Let's get started with that. We're going to write a feature for the basic dialog. So we're going to create a new file and let's call it basic dialog feature. And again, I am going to go ahead and insert all of the code in here for you. Watch this. And here it is. Here are the scenarios that we want to have. The first one is getting some basic information from the dialog itself. It's checking the title and checking the content. The second one is closing the dialog and making sure that it is not visible. And in fact, I have also gone ahead and provided the step definitions for this. As you see, I'm visiting a basic dialog page. On that basic dialog page, I'm checking to see if the title should equal that. Next one, I'm checking to make sure the content equals that. Here I'm telling it to close, and so on and so on. The next thing that I need to do is I actually need to go ahead and create the page object that it has this information. So I'm going to create a new directory called pages under support, and inside of there I'm going to create a new Ruby class. Basic dialog page. And let's go ahead and say that we're ready to go with that. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and magically insert the code into here that we need. And here it is. Now, as you can see, I specified a page URL. I also had to wrap my call to jQuery UI basic dialog inside of a frame. The reason for that is because in that page it is in a frame. If you want to see the details of how I discovered this and how I made sure that I knew the classes and all the information about this, you definitely want to watch the previous episode, because there I go through all the details of doing that. But this is all I need to do for this. Now watch what happens when I try to run my Cucumber scenarios. I'm just going to try to run them straight out from the command line right now, and let's see what happens. Wow, I get an error right away, and that error is we don't know anything about this jQuery UI basic dialog. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and take care of that. Oh, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and add my focus to this very first scenario. And now I'm going to need to add enough code to get my test suite so that they can run. Run with a failure, mind you, but at least begin to run, because it's only then that I can start my actual loop. So I'm going to create a new class, and in that class is going to be called Basic Dialog. Okay? And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to make sure that his module or his namespace inside of the correct module. And as we saw last episode, I need to inherit from one of the page object elements. And so we're going to inherit from div. And that is all I'm going to put in here for right now. But I am going to go back up to my top level module. There's a couple things I need to do here. Require a page object, and then I need to require that class that I just created. Okay. And as you saw last week, we actually need to register these with page object. Query UI. How did we call this? We called it, let's go here to our page, jQuery UI basic dialog. Okay. Let's go back over here and run Cucumber again. Well, I actually have the wrong page. Okay, whoops, and I also did not mean to close my terminal either. Okay. Sorry about that. What I saw there real quickly is that I made a typo in my page. It should be jQueryui.com/dialog. Let me go ahead and quickly set this up again, run this again so that you can see. Ah, there we go. Much better. It's going to the correct page, but it is failing. Undefined method close. Very good. And the one before it. So we are actually ready to start up our development loop now. Bundle exec, cup guard, -I and -C, a couple of command line parameters that I passed to it. I am now focusing on that very first scenario, and it says that expected basic dialog, it got an empty string, etc., etc. Well, that's good news because we haven't implemented anything inside of our actual class yet. I'm going to once again pause and do that. Okay, here is the code, and what you will notice is that I've added just enough code to get this first profile to pass, and when it runs, it passes. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and move my focus down to the second one, second scenario. Let's let that run, and it is going to say, oh, sorry, I don't work. I don't know about this close method. And so we're going to go ahead and add that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and add that. And I've added it. It's running the test again. And it passed. So far we have shown that we have everything running correctly with water. And I'll run the whole suite once again, just so you can see that. I'm going to run the whole suite with Selenium. And I could use the Selenium WebDriver profile to do that. And let's see what happens here. And look at that, would you? We got an error. Doesn't know about the demo frame. Isn't that interesting? That is something I need to look into. Wow. I definitely need to look into that. I don't want to take the time during this screencast to look into that. I am going to go ahead and make a first 0.1 release of this gem using what is here. Actually, don't grab this quite yet because there might be some issue in there. I'm going to have to dig in to see why that is not finding that frame. But I do want to complete the screencast. And there you have that part of it. So we have everything ready. What I need to do now is I need to go ahead and push everything that I have so far up to Git. Now I've actually already created a Git repository. So all I need to do is just add the remote and then push everything up. So let me go ahead and do that now. I'm having trouble grabbing one at a time. And now, oops, looks to me like I did something wrong here. The directory is actually .idea. Let's commit. Okay. Everything is there now. Okay. So, believe it or not, we have enough to go ahead and release. There is one gem that is, or one widget that is in there. I'm going to go ahead and make a release. And here it goes. It's going to go ahead and tag it. And it is now published. We can go out here and we can do a search for it. And it finds it, and it is ready to go. I will be adding more widgets to this over the coming weeks. Hopefully this will be a nice gem that you will enjoy using. And wow, why don't you guys take a try to add something with it? Help me out with this gem a little bit. And I really hope that you enjoyed this session. I had a little bit of difficulties there at the end. I'm going to take care of that off video and figure out what's going on there. And thanks a lot.